Howdy, howdy. We are live on another Friday night, and we are going to be talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's a little bittersweet for me because we're starting our final season of DS9. The Prophets only gave us 7 seasons to talk about, but it,
The wormhole aliens, I think, is what you mean to
oh
say.
well, they're big, thick, juicy seasons of 26 episodes though, so
Yeah,
still
that's
still
true.
a
That's
lot. But
true.
we're just gonna be talking about the first 8 of season 7. But yeah, it's a lot to talk about. So Dave, I think we should go ahead and get the show started if you're ready.
Yeah, let's hit it.
I'm Fatheree,
This is Dave.
and this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 227th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we are talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 7. This will be the first of 3 podcasts discussing the 7th and final season of DS9. So we're going to be talking about the first 8 episodes from Season 7. That's everything from the two-parter that started it with Image in the Sand and Shadows and Symbols, all the way up to the Siege of AR-558. And Dave, these are all your first viewing of these. You haven't watched this far
Yep.
previously.
I hit a few milestones in there, some big stuff that I didn't. Stuff, one or two things I knew was going to happen. I just didn't know exactly when and where. But I also got some surprises thrown at me. I mean, just randomly when what do you call it? When Wayun, many episodes out, is like, I want to defect. I was like, what the hell? I was very intrigued by that. I knew it was a possible trick, but I was just like, that's how you do a cold open. So I was, every time I'm seeing something like that, I'm like, what? What? No.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun for me because these are all episodes that I watched when they originally aired, and now we're in 1998, and we're about to be in 1999. Looking back at when season 7 originally aired, and growing up, I didn't have people that I could talk to Star Trek about regularly.
Right.
Other than I had like an uncle that was into it, but no one, like none of my friends at school or like no one in my immediate family. So it's so lovely now to have this community of people to talk about Star Trek with, and have my co-host and dear friend Dave to talk about this with, and get to see his experience and reaction to this. I'm never quite sure how he's going to react to some of this stuff, and then some of it I'm like, oh, I bet he really digs this when we get to it. So it's been just a tremendous amount of fun for me.
Yeah, as for me, as grueling as it can sometimes be to marathon, I know a whopping 8 or 9 episodes in a week, which some people can do in a day. But for me, it's rough. It's like it's absolutely been worth it for DS9. There's
Well,
one of the few things I would do it for.
that's saying a lot. Like
Yeah.
like Dave likes he likes shows that have like less than 20 episodes total, like Firefly.
Yes, that's my ideal. I was like, oh, thank God they canceled it. This is the perfect level of commitment for me.
Yeah, you never like got bored of it and had to
That's
stop
right.
watching.
That's
So.
right.
But I also want to thank our patrons out there. If I can just do a little bit of quick housekeeping and give a huge shout out to all of our lovely patrons. That's Starfleet Boy, Kick is Eternal, Gay Clevin Lundstrom, Crazy Dutchy, Joanne Robertson, Quark Spar, John Dog, Geek Filter, Earl Grey Trekkie, and our anonymous supporters. I see several of y'all in the live audience right now. Thank you so much for chipping in every month to help us out. And if anyone's interested in the Patreon, you can come in as little as $2 per month. If you want to be more generous, we have some additional perks as well. But if you're doing the $2 a month, you can come to our monthly watch parties where you get to watch episodes of Star Trek with Dave and me and some of our other friends and the other patrons, and it's a lot of fun. We just did the 2 Moriarty episodes of TNG, getting ready for the return of that character. We're about to do, in about 2 weeks on February 11th, Attached. That's the TNG episode with Crusher and Picard, where they kind of like escape captivity, but they have this telepathic link and they see each other's secret romantic feelings. And, if they are going to do something romantic between Crusher and Picard in season 3, very likely, this might be a good episode to revisit. So that'll be February 11th, right before the premiere of Picard season 3 on, I believe that's the 16th, right?
Yes.
So that's going to be, in 3 weeks, we'll switch gears. We'll run out of DS9, but we'll have plenty of Picard to talk about. So we'll do weekly coverage of that. Sunday, if you're watching this live on Friday, you should know that Sunday we're doing a stream to break down that trailer that's going to come out during the AFC conference finals that is on CBS. So the game starts at 5:30, so we figure like halftime will probably be around 7-ish, so around 8 p.m. Central. We'll break down that final Picard trailer. And if you're in the LA area in late February, I'm going to be on the Star Trek cruise. So I don't know what all is going to be happening in LA, but if anyone else is going to be on the cruise, please be sure to say hi to me. I've done the cruise a couple times before. I love it. It's a lot of fun. So that's like the last week of February. So all of that done, all that out of the way. We're done with the housekeeping. Dave, what's the one thing I forgot?
What did you forget?
We were just talking about it.
I have no idea.
Oh, if anyone is checking us out live and they want to show some support, we do accept the super chat feature on YouTube. So please feel free to take advantage of that. And okay, now we're done with all the housekeeping. Let's get into Deep Space Nine Season 7, starting with Image in the Sand. Written by Ira Stephen Bear and Hans Beimler, directed by Les Landau, or not Landau, I think is how you say their name.
Sounds right.
Lando's the other Star franchise. Not to be confused with Londo, who's in the other space station show. Sisko tries to regain contact with the Prophets. And it's kind of a two-parter with the next episode, Shadows and Symbols, same writers, but directed by Alan Craker. So I think we can just kind of talk about all this episode, or all this story together. But the second episode, Shadows and Symbols, Sisko searches for the mysterious orb of the emissary. Worf, Martok, Bashir, O'Brien, and Quark attack a Dominion shipyard in orbit around Monac 4. Kira confronts the Romulans over their arming of their hospital. Deep Space Nine also receives a new resident who has a very familiar name. So that is, of course, a reference to Ezri Dax. So a lot going on in these 2 episodes.
Ezri Dax seems so young, but we'll get around to that. Let's we'll come around to it.
Well, I have very strong memories of anticipating this season, like all summer of 1998. We ended with like the death of Jadzia at the end of season 6. We ended with Dukat has cut off the prophets from the emissary, from the Bajorans. So Sisko is hanging out at the restaurant in New Orleans. So a lot of stuff going on. And I just remember like the opening shot of Kira and Odo on the promenade watching the cult of the Pa Wraiths. These weird Bajoran cult members praying the evil version of praying to the evil version. Sorry, I can't talk. Praying to the evil version of the wormhole aliens.
Oh yeah.
And so I just remember just seeing the opening of this and thinking like, okay, this is the last season premiere of DS9, and this is how it opens with like Kira. It felt like a big like iconic, historic moment.
It had that momentous quality for you.
Yeah.
Well, you're essentially seeing what I presume will be some version of the final army, getting itself together. Although I don't know, I don't know. But then, that was also a cute scene with them. Like, Odo was upbeat in this sequence. What was it? She says, that was some kiss, wasn't it? And he's like, changed my life.
Yeah, a lot of people, if you're a fan of the Odo Kira relationship, which I know not everyone is, but if you are, I think that's like one of the highlights of it. Like that, that's one of those little line deliveries that people are just like, "Ah, that's so sweet." I see a lot
Yeah,
of that.
it's really cute. I don't know where I'll end up on it when all's said and done, but having seen a decent little chunk of it now, I can say that I don't know that I fully buy into it, but I thought their presentation has been pretty good. How can you not like seeing Odo kind of happy, seeing them have dates and all that stuff? So I have been able to go with it, and I'm not like, I don't think I'll be like, well, I'm always going to be ignoring those episodes or anything like that. It's worked out.
Well, let's get into like the Cisco stuff at the restaurant before the arrival of Ezri. Cisco has just been, it's been like a couple of months. Kira's promoted to colonel, so she's running the station. She's doing all the Cisco stuff. He's just been hanging out at this piano, just playing the piano. What I think they said like, oh yeah, he's been there since like 7 a.m. this morning. So
He's waiting for a sign.
yeah, well, he gets a sign, through his baseball. But this is one of the things, you might have remember the last couple of weeks when we were wrapping up season 6. I said I love season 6, but there's some stuff like the end of season 6, the end of season 7 that is I'm a little not a fan of. Let's say I think things get like a little shaky, a little sloppy. Like we were talking about, like the death of Jadzia probably should have been handled a little better. Should have had like a more more impact.
Yeah, that's something I would have liked to have had. Although I think some of the follow-up, what Worf does in her memory and stuff like that, kind of retroactively lends some weight to it. But yeah.
The other thing I kind of struggle with around here is the revelation that Cisco's mom was actually this whole other woman that he never knew about. And I'm fine with the truth being revealed. Like, he's actually like part wormhole alien. Like his actual birth mom was like possessed by a prophet and got in a relationship with Joseph Sisko, and they had this baby, and then she left when she got unpossessed. Kind of cruel to do to her, but they at least like shine a light on that in the episode. The reason why I kind of struggle with it is like, are you telling me that like this man Benjamin Lafayette Sisko in the 24th century, he's never seen his own birth certificate? Or like, you're telling me like there's like no one in his family, he didn't have like an aunt or uncle that came over to him when he was a kid and was like, come here, boy, let me tell you about your real mom. I knew her. I knew that woman that left your dad. Like, I just feel like the truth would have come out,
Man, families can hide some secrets, and Deep Space Nine's characters have their flaws, even the very best of them. So I don't know. I don't think that's too big an issue. I might have thought that it would have somehow come out during like maybe Starfleet vetting stuff, but not necessarily.
Like, I don't have a problem with, like, Joseph hiding it. It just, like, he doesn't seem like, like, the mastermind who'd, like, be able to, like, hide all the records and stuff. I would assume it'd be pretty difficult to do in the future. Just, it felt very, like, soap opera kind of writing, like, what if he found out his mother was this other person? And just, like, the baseball rolls off the piano, and then Jake is like, the woman you're trying to recreate this image of. Like, I just saw a picture of her the other day, and it's like, look, she had, like, this Bajoran piece of jewelry that has this ancient writing on it. And it just felt like very, very convenient.
Well, when you get into kind of signs and portents and mystic symbols and things like that, things can definitely start to feel a little non-Star Trek-y and more like fantasy types tropes.
That's not my issue though. I don't have a problem. Like I think there's enough science fiction explanation.
So it's not that you don't mind that those coincidences I think are sort of like what I would call like the hand of fate or the hand of the prophets moving things, and if that's bothersome. But you just don't like that. That Cisco was. You just don't buy it.
Yeah, I don't buy that. Like the secret would have been kept like that long, and then just like, this is like now like all the dominoes fall in place for all this stuff to be revealed.
It's interesting. That one it didn't particularly no major issues for me. I wasn't in love with it in the same way that I'm not like kind of in love with prophetic stuff in general in fiction. But again,
so that's
man,
interesting.
They've been built.
I have no issue with that. I was like, like these aliens like view time differently. So like all that stuff makes sense to me.
Yeah, and they've been building, since episode 1. So
you asked me, speaking of that episode 1 emissary, you asked me like when that there's like a Bajoran dude hanging out on the promenade when Cisco arrives, and he like goes up to Cisco like, "Oh, you need to talk to Kaiopaka. You're like the chosen one and stuff." And you're
Right.
like, "How did that guy know that there's something special about Cisco?" That seemed like kind of like mystical and stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe he had the ability to detect the dude who's like part wormhole alien, but I told you way back then when we talked about that, I was like, well, maybe there's an explanation for that when we get to season 7.
Fatheree's own prophecy.
Well, it
And by
helps
the
if
way,
you've already seen the show. So.
right, you experience time in a different way than I do.
I suppose so.
It's that Dr. Manhattan thing. If I'm not mistaken, before we get to this, we have learned on the station that the invasion of Cardassia, is it, has ground to a halt. Is that right? Or is it
Right. They captured Chintaka. We saw that at the end of season 6, but
Right.
it sounds like they haven't been able to move past that, and maybe
Right.
that's the wormhole aliens are cut off. They're not helping people out.
So there is this sense that, like, as we're getting into Cisco stuff, that it's not, just like some, what will this mean for him personally? This is, possibly the fate of the station, the quadrant, everything, potentially behind this too. Like, we know that the war effort is suddenly hit a snag.
Loco NY in our live audience has a very interesting comment that I like. They're saying, I would rather the Prophet had actually been in love with Ben's dad, but couldn't remain corporeal for long. So she had to go back to she doesn't go back to the wormhole. She's, I guess, living in this orb of the emissary that they dig up on the planet Tyree. But yeah,
right.
couldn't
So it's
stick
more
around.
like some sort of physical limitation. It was, they would have stayed if possible.
But I'm kind of okay with like the Prophet's they're like a little dickish like that. Like, it's messed up that they would just take over someone's life like that. But they're
it does seem
about...
like they view those things a little bit differently than us, and sometimes Cisco has to get frustrated with them. We've certainly seen that. This is a little, by the way, Star-Lord, to lean into the Marvel universe. Star-Lord and Ego is his space dad.
Depending on what if you read the comics or watch the movies.
Sure, I'm just talking about the movie stuff.
He has a different dad in the comics, but there's the stabbing in the alley with the the cult member. So I like that because it kind of right off the bat in season 7, they introduced this Pa Wraith cult, and they don't really have time to do anything with them in these initial 8 episodes we talk about, other than just establishing that they're there and then showing how deadly and dangerous they can be. Like, oh yeah, they'll just like run up to the emissary on Earth. They'll go all the way to Earth and just stab this dude.
Yeah. I had a feeling when that dude showed up, I was like, this guy ain't gonna play around. I thought Cisco might get like hurt pretty bad in it.
You know what I remember about him back in 1998 is this was shortly before the other Star franchise returned to theaters after a 16-year hiatus, and we were starting to see pictures on the internet of Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor in like Jedi robes and stuff.
Yep.
And I was like really excited for the Phantom Menace. It turned out I hated the movie, but when I saw this dude, I was like, oh, he looks like a Bajoran Jedi kind of. That's neat.
He also looks like he might be about to drop a hot hip hop track.
I like that Jake got to do like a little bit of action and hit him with a sack of flour or potatoes or whatever he hit him with and knocked him out to defend his dad.
Yeah, Jake is like he like grew up so quickly, he just like shot up. So yeah, he feels like somebody who could do that. But also Jake is like of he and Nog as the initial pairing that they were. Nog became the kind of more active physical guy, and he kind of became a little bit more the cerebral reporter guy. So yeah, it was nice to see him get a little moment there.
Remember season 5, Nor the Battle to the Strong, when him and Bashir were getting attacked by Klingons, and Jake kind of he I don't want to, it sounds judgmental to call him a coward, but yeah, he was overwhelmed with fear, and he didn't do anything to take action. He abandoned Bashir. He abandoned that dude that he found, the injured. So here I guess they finally let Sirach Lofton do some actiony stuff and knock a guy out.
Yep.
Let's get into like the introduction of Ezri Dax. Just Dave, after you've only seen 8 episodes of her, and one of them, the first episode, she literally just like knocks on the door and is like, "Hi, I'm Ezri Dax," and that's all you get
Right.
from her. But
And they
you've
don't
kind of.
like they don't shoehorn her into every single episode, so she doesn't get like tons and tons of screen time. So, but she also doesn't get nothing.
What do you
Um,
think so far, and about her introduction with the
I'm liking
Cisco
her.
family?
My immediate reaction was that about 20-ish years before Tilly, she had a lot of Tilly's qualities. She had her kind of social awkwardness and sort of slightly stammering, unsure of herself and yet talkative quality of Tilly. And that as portrayed in a kind of endearing way, not like sort of uncomfortable, but just like sort of endearingly awkward. I don't know. I guess arguably it might be fall into that trope of manic pixie dream girl, but I don't know about. But yeah, no, I liked her. I liked the idea,
It's
the
funny. It's
premise
funny
behind
you
it.
use that term because I actually had no idea what that meant until a few hours ago. I googled
Oh
it
well,
because I saw someone else using it, but
yeah, I think I've known about it for at least 5+ years, 5-10 years. It
it
seems
doesn't
like it.
apply to her. By the way, that's if a character doesn't have like their own purpose or like their own agency, and
Right,
they
right. It's sort of it's a little bit like the sort of magical Negro trope, but a
yeah,
little bit
that's what
more
they said on the. You must have read the same Wikipedia page that I read because they use that as a comparison there too.
interesting. No, I've talked about the trope before. It comes up in a lot of like genre fiction, um, Scott
Yeah,
Pilgrim and comics and stuff I've
if
read.
you're like Scott Pilgrim was another example they cited. But if you're like me and you weren't familiar with that, yeah, it's basically like whenever there's like this, I don't know, like a cute, quirky, excited
Yeah, some kind of like Drew Barrymore type
gal
girl who's
shows up.
like, I want to take you on a voyage of self-discovery.
Right, but she only exists so that the male protagonist character can learn something about himself,
Right.
which I don't think applies to Esri, but it was cool to give her like this introduction, and just I really have to compliment Nicole DeBoer playing Esri Dax
Hmm.
because I think she knew exactly on day one how to play this character, and she came into the show with all these established characters, these established actors, especially with Avery Brooks and Cirroc Lofton and Brock Peters. Those three dudes, they knew how to play that family. Like that's honestly like
Oh
one of the
yeah.
best TV families in all of science fiction. Certainly like the best like three generations of men families in all science fiction. I can't think of anything else that comes close. Like those guys knew the assignment. They knew how to do that job, and she's able to
Yep.
to stand her own with them when they're journeying through the desert, and Cisco's having visions of being Benny Russell locked in the institution.
Yeah.
So
I thought that also she does a lot of sort of visual acting with like kind of uh, she's got certain facial tics and quirks, and in almost in the same way that Jeff Goldblum does. That some actors just kind of I don't know if she brings it that it does it in other roles, um, but it did seem like it suited her outward visual affectations, suited what we knew of her visually, which was she was struggling. She was trying to get hold of all of these things. So she kind of tends to emote instantly. She doesn't, she's not covering up who she is or trying to hide that she's in a little bit of confusion and turmoil. It's quite apparent.
And I've also noticed a lot, like I've watched Deep Space Nine with a lot of people, and I feel like so many people just like as soon as Ezri is introduced into the show, like they just develop a crush on Ezri, and I think it's because Jadzia is so Terry Farrell's like very tall and played that character with extreme confidence and
Hmm.
wisdom, and that's kind of the whole point. She's like
Like a
wise
certain
beyond her years,
intimidation,
and
do you think?
right, and then Ezri is she's younger and smaller and more awkward and stuff, and seems like much more approachable.
Sure.
I think it's cool that they went like so different, but they still kept her like okay. They kept her a woman, so I think that was a good idea. So that Kira's not the only girl. They even like kind of. I don't know. She kind of looks like a smaller version of Terry Shaw, right? Like they're both like dark hair, fair skin, blue eyes, but
Right.
one's like a lot
Which
smaller than the other, a lot shorter.
arguably there was no special reason to do that other than it creates a visual continuity, and I think it might have been jarring for fans who to just have a character wildly different.
Yeah, you could tune into the show and you would immediately understand. New Dax, who dis, right?
Loco New York says Ezri felt like she would be Jadzia's younger sister. I kind of like that.
It's kind of a shame that. I mean, obviously, because Jadzia had to die for Ezri to be introduced, but yeah, we never get to see them play off of each other.
Yeah, that is too bad.
Because I bet that would have been fun.
Although arguably Jadzia is inside her playing off of her, so.
Yeah, and every now and then you'll kind of see like a Jadzia mannerism kind of come out of Ezri. I think that might have been just the writers kind of writing like, oh, she already has like this kind of relationship with Quark, so this is like a Jadzia kind of thing to say,
right, and she can chat with Core.
Yeah, so I like seeing Nikki DeBoer do those little Jadzia moments, because she hadn't, if I remember correctly, she knew Star Trek. She'd watched like The Next Generation.
Okay.
And she was already working as an actor when DS9 was going on, and she hadn't kept up with the show, but they gave her like all the important Dax episodes to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And so she did do like some homework going into it. But
okay.
But speaking of actors playing new characters and stuff, we get to see Casey Biggs outside of his Damar Cardassian makeup, and he's Dr. Wyckoff.
It took me a minute or so on him to quite pin him down. I don't know why. Damar's kind of like his personality doesn't come through quite as much in his voice, but I did really like seeing him. Jill had a question about this scene. She asked, how did the Pa Wraiths know about Benny Russell? Do they share consciousness with the prophets or what?
Oh. Wouldn't that be cool if like they're all part of like the same hive mind, but like half of them are good and half of them are evil, and it's
right.
like, but they're working with like the same information.
Yeah, it could be some complicated thing where they're on the edge of the hive mind. They can pick up some stuff, but not everything.
But yeah, they might have just like looked into Sisko's mind and they could see the fingerprints of the prophets, what they had done in there.
I think that was my assumption, is that they were pulling from what he had and using the material they had to work with.
As a kid, this really bothered me. When I watched this in 1998, I was like, okay, if Sisko's mom was a prophet, these 40-something years earlier, like she was like on Earth hanging out with Joseph Sisko, all this stuff, she surely must have like a comprehension of linear time. So how come an emissary, the first episode, when Sisko meets them in the wormhole and he has to explain time with them, through baseball, he explains linear time. Like, why wouldn't they have known that? And then one day, many years later, when I was adult, I was taking my trash out one night, and for whatever random reason, I guess it's because I'm weird and I think about Star Trek too much, I was just standing there in the parking lot with this bag of trash, and I just like stopped dead in my tracks, and it dawned on me, it's like, oh, the Sarah entity, the Sisko mom entity, was outside of the wormhole when he went in there, and even though she had learned about linear time when she's laying the tracks for her son to be born, she wasn't in the wormhole, so that's why they didn't know. And then at the end of this episode, we kind of see that beam of light come out of the orb and go into the wormhole and repair it and everything. It's like, okay, that's when she like rejoined the wormhole. So
okay, yeah.
It's like something that had been like bothering me for like years and years and years, and then like I just felt like I had like an epiphany all of a sudden. I felt like I was like Sisko, and like the prophets like appeared to me. It was like taking like the forms of like all the people in my life talking to me. It was like that.
That's pretty cool. I like that. And I'll say this, like, I can give some pretty decent leeway with alien stuff. Just because one of them, because they experience linear time doesn't mean that they understand it. It may be like, oh, I can push myself to do this, but I don't really grasp why I'm doing it. I'm doing it by rote or something like that. I'm following what I see, how their physics works, but I don't, like, I'm not, my nonlinear brain can't really still comprehend it. So.
But yeah, and that's, probably why they decided that they need an emissary, and there's something at the end of the show that I'll
I got a lot of that stuff. I have to sort of see how it plays out.
But yeah, the Sisko stuff, it is a little weird. it sounds like you might have liked it more than me. So, I was kind of worried about some of the what I call like the shaky stuff at the end of season 6, the end of season 7. But I think the show gets back on track after this for me. It is, I kind of like,
I like seeing, like you, I like seeing the Cisco family.
Yeah.
I was worried they were going to give Granddad a heart attack, though. Goddamn.
Yeah, Brock Peters was a old man, walking around out in the desert and stuff when they shot this. But I was gonna say something else about that, but I forgot what it was. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it was cool to give Ezri kind of a ceremonious introduction. Like, she's part of like something big, and oh, I remember now.
By the way, it is just good plotting to get her involved in the adventure so quickly. Cisco accepts her, so like if you don't, like, you're going against the head of the show. If you're gonna fight it, you got to fight Cisco.
I kind of like the Messiah imagery with Cisco. I think it's downplayed enough that it's not like too heavy-handed. I mean, like if Zack Snyder made this, he would have had like Cisco like literally like nailed to a cross or something.
He's got like a shepherd's crook.
Yeah, I don't think he's a very good storyteller. Doesn't understand subtlety or allegory.
That looked
or anything.
like reasonable, also reasonable clothes that you'd be wearing that weren't Starfleet, desert garb.
Yeah, but he's wandering around in the desert like he's Moses, and kind of like his birth. Okay, he's got a dad named Joseph, and he's kind of like this god baby. So, kind of Jesus-y, kind of Moses-y. So I like that they're kind of using those familiar touchstones to people who grew up on Earth.
Why not? That is, when you're talking about prophets, man.
But let's get into the Kira and Romulan stuff, and then we'll save the Worf stuff for last with these 2 episodes that kick off season 7. But Kira versus Senator Kretek. What do you think of that stuff?
On some level, I was disappointed to have another bad Romulan, because I liked the idea of a Romulan that would sort of break the mold a bit, but I could also tell that she was laying it on a bit thick, and that there was at least something else going on. I actually really liked the moral complexity of the situation, which is, oh yes, you can build a hospital. Oh shit, you put weapons. You're using it as a military depot.
Romulan's gonna Romulan.
Right? Yeah. That was a great complex situation. Very Deep Space Nine.
And I like the tension between Admiral Ross and Kira, where he's like, "I'm gonna force you to do this," which is kind of messed up. But I get it. They have a war to fight. They need the Romulans. We saw how desperate they were without the Romulans, and even now with the Romulans, it's still not. They're still not moving forward like they want to be. So, but the best part of this storyline in these 2 episodes for me is, I think this is where I began to appreciate the Kira and Odo romance. Just seeing him be so supportive of her, and it's something you don't. A lot of stories. What's like the old cliche of like, behind every strong man is a strong woman.
Right.
And I like that's a cool thing about having a romantic partner is you do have someone who can support you and help you through the challenges of life. But I loved kind of the role reversal here, where you see the strong man behind the strong woman, and see Colonel Kira have to make the tough choices, and having Odo support her through that.
I think that's a good observation, and I'm going to make a superficial observation, which is the same one Jill did in the audience, that Kira is at her loveliest in season 7, I think.
Oh, you like her with the longer hair?
Yeah, and she also had like a little braid in it. It was just like, it kind of looked at maybe also a little bit more chic, sort of stylish. I always liked Kira. I always thought she was a babe, but yeah, that's maybe just a notch above.
Nana visitors often like kept her hair very short, and then I saw her in Vegas back in August, and she kind of had like shoulder length hair. It's the longest I'd ever seen her hair, other than when she has the wig on, like the Kira flashbacks back during the occupation. They always give her the wig with the long hair. But yeah, she pulls off that look as well. So good for Nana, still looking good all these years later. I sometimes say that, to me, like Deep Space Nine, it's the most Texan Star Trek, and it's also the most Irish Star Trek. And I'm obviously like looking for things that I want to see in there, just as a Texan of Irish descent. But I really love the idea of, there's a kind of a tradition in like Irish culture of, standing up for like the little guys, the little country, the underdog countries, the small countries that sometimes get bullied around or bossed around by
Mm-hmm.
the bigger superpower countries, which, happens when you're next to the British Empire for hundreds of years. But when the Bajorans like make their stand against the Romulans, like like these little Bajoran ships just get like shredded by a Romulan warbird, but they're like, no, like if you're gung ho about keeping your weapons on our moon, then okay, we're gonna make you prove it. Yeah, like
Yeah.
maybe
By
you
the way,
can mop the floor with us, but we're gonna make you prove it.
I was watching those scenes and I was like, what is Kira's play? What is she doing? I was like, it's got to be more than a bluff. She has to have some trick up her sleeve because she is going to get wrecked. And she was like, I was like, oh, that was just a bluff.
And I don't know. I can see how like
And Senator Kretak is a pretty hard ass person too.
yeah, but she felt like believable. She's she was there to play hardball too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And Ross,
Well, like
is,
you wouldn't establish what they did and be ready to back down. Like that was an important thing for them.
and Ross, I was kind of judgmental of him a second ago. I said like he's being kind of a jerk, forcing this on the Bajorans, but I get his perspective too. He's trying to maintain the alliance and win the war. And I guess the reason why I appreciate, the Romulan still being a treacherous Romulan is it shows how difficult it is to maintain this alliance. It's hard enough, working with the Klingons. Sometimes they can be difficult customers. Now, throw Romulans into the mix as well. It really made it feel like this was it's kind of an achievement. Just keeping all these people working together on the same side is a hard job
Right.
in and of itself.
The Klingons are like it's like trying to keep like rowdy kids under control sometimes, and the Romulans are like like that manipulative kid.
Yeah, they're the smarter, more conniving one.
Possibly a young sociopath. Yes.
What do you think of like funny Odo? All like the jokes and stuff he makes. He's like, well, at least it was a fun relationship, even though it's not going to last long. We're about to blow up and die.
It's still rooted in some classic Odo fatalism.
Yeah.
It's I thought it's a good fit. It showed that he had changed, but he wasn't like so wildly different that he was like a new man.
He saves that for Kira. He's always been clever. He might have like a clever remark for Quark every now and then. But I like that like he saves like the really like funny jokey stuff for when he's with Kira.
Yeah, it's cute.
Well, let's get into the Worf stuff. Talking about this happy new romance between Kira and Odo. Let's talk about the man who just lost his wife.
Right, and who's got to deal with a someone on the station, but not yet, not yet. First, there's the
He's
follow through of Jedzia, and I loved this
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah, he's Worf is not doing well. He's tearing up the Holosuite. Vic Fontaine is freaking out. And so I like that everyone is like, well, what do we do to calm down Worf? Like, okay, O'Brien is his best friend on the station. Let's O'Brien go drink with Worf and find out how to fix this. I liked their conversation, just like, oh yeah, remember that guy, Lieutenant Barclay, and Worf just be like, who could forget him? And just, yeah, remember Geordi waving that sword around, the Three Musketeers on the holodeck and all of that.
Yeah, and they
It's
would
like,
come.
oh, yeah,
They
I
come
remember
back.
that too.
They come back to this a few episodes later, and it was like, oh, nice. They connected on a level. Aside, they've got their shared history, and now they've got a drinking history.
Yeah. Yeah, but basically he's upset because Jadzia died and didn't go to Stovokor, and so Worf being as dedicated of a Klingon as he is, I would even say like with Klingon religion, he strikes me as he'd be like the fundamentalist type.
Sure.
He'd be like the guy who like believes like the letter of the law and the way to interpret the Bible or something. Like it's
Yeah.
all like literal, like what's written here. So
He scared me
wanna-
in the Risa episode. I'm still
Yeah.
still a little worried about him after that.
I would assume that, you're at war with the Cardassians and a Cardassian killed your wife. Like, I would assume that would still count as like dying in battle, but apparently not. I guess like there's like some loophole of like, well, if they're possessed by a cosmic deity or something like that, like it doesn't count or something. But he would be the guy if there was some loophole like that. He'd be like, oh, it doesn't count then. So
right, but also she was essentially killed like a bystander. They didn't have an actual fight. I don't know if there was footage of it or how like they know exactly what happened in the end, but yeah, I guess to me it did feel like she was sort of killed almost incidentally. And so she didn't get to like throw down. But also, this is more about Worf than what really happened to her. Yeah, it's like about his thoughts, and arguably he's ready to like put people's lives on the line for this, for his belief.
Yeah, and they have this, cool mission of like, oh, we're going to blow up this shipyard that's like right next to a sun. And it's kind of a, cool visual idea. It looked neat. There's a lot of tension on the bird of prey when, they're all getting too hot. When Quark is like, Moogie, take me out of the oven. I'm done or whatever he says. But, he wanted to do like the special thing for Jadzia and, Martok is going to take him on this mission. But then all of a sudden, everyone else wants to come along. So Bashir and now O'Brien and Quark. But
yeah. I liked that. I liked how Quark got snippy with him, and Worf clapped back, and he's like, "You should be thanking me for being on here." And then Martok kind of talked him down, and he's like, "Hey, they're all here out of love, man."
Oh, I love Martok in this episode because they write him so Klingon, but yet he's like so noble and such a like a good guy. I mean, he's kind of a jerk in an upcoming episode, but you're still sympathetic to it. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But just the Martok consistently is written so well because like you never forget that he's a Klingon. Like they never betray his Klingon side, but they also like always maintain a likability to him. And I think that could be kind of even Worf often comes off as an asshole. You're just talking about how big of a jerk he was on Ryza. So I like that with Martok they're able to make him he's just like the perfect Klingon in so many ways.
Well, I kind of like feel like it suits his organic life that we've seen, which is to say he went from being a proud warrior to a prisoner of war and getting kind of broken by that to returning to, full Klingon warrior status. But it feels like his warrior status is tempered a little bit, that he's not as dogmatic, that he's a little bit like, when he's able to talk to Alexander, or, let his guard down, at times and be a little less hardcore Klingon. I feel like that's the result of experiences he's had. It's not just like the writers are like, that's just who he's going to be. It's like, I feel like it fits who all the events we've seen.
And he's so good with Worf. He's good. He helped Worf fix his relationship with his son. He helped Worf, not ruin the marriage when the wedding when they were having difficulties there. And he helps Worf here. So that stuff was really cool. I'm always a sucker for the Klingon stuff.
And his way, he's he not in his way. He is as important as Joseph Sisko as a father figure.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I don't really have anything else on these episodes other than there's some Cardassia Prime stuff. We see.
It looks cool, by the way. Like it's setting off like a solar flare, all that stuff with the birds of prey. That's dope action scenes.
I love seeing the Cardassian ship that's like under construction, and you're just seeing kind of like its skeleton, just like the infrastructure that hasn't been completed. But it's cool that that they're able to depict that here. It's also a war thing, like, oh, what do you do in war? You blow up people's factories and shipyards and stuff like that. So
Fatheree, I had a fear at the end of this episode that there was going to be some sort of symbolic scene where we would see Jadzia, even if it was only in silhouette by another actress or something, like entering the gates of Klingon Valhalla. And I was like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. I was like, it's just too much. I'm glad they didn't do that.
They do that dumb stuff on an episode of Voyager, but not on DS9.
Good job, DS9. You knew when to hold back.
I don't have anything else on these other two episodes other than I like the Cardassia Prime stuff. You see Weyoun and Damar and them, not getting along, but you're talking about, how the war's going. You see Damar hitting the Kanar a bit too much, perhaps.
I think I told you off mic. I kind of liked Damar kind of not taking shit from Wayoon and kind of just being like his own guy, even if it was, yes, like that kind of self-destructive falling into alcoholism stuff. Like Wayoon needs some pushback. He's those obnoxious Vorta. Yeah.
But Wayoon can hold his own too. Like, I like when Damar had that lady friend hanging around, and Wayoon is like, "You might want to tell her to get out of here, because if she hears what I'm about to tell you, I'll have to kill her." And then the way that the way that like she kind of like gives him the stink eye when she walks out of the room, and then Wayoon's just like, "Lovely woman." Just
yeah.
Jeffrey Combs is so good at that.
He knows how to throw the barbs. He is like who's the guy? Who's the eunuch on Game of Thrones?
Oh, Varys, yeah.
He's got something in common with Varys as far as like being quietly manipulative and cutting. He's got those words that bite.
They're both kind of forced to be an asexual person too by their masters, because Varys had his genitalia
it's supposed
removed,
to be in its way, what sets allows them to think outside the box.
But Vorta are like designed that way by the founders, so they're kind of both that's interesting. I would love to see a conversation between the two of them. I can hear their voices talking to each other.
Yeah.
I'm not clever enough to come up with like clever enough dialogue to be worthy of the two of them, but I'm sure like a good writer could do that, pull that off.
Somebody write that up, put it on Tumblr, and I will share the meme.
Well, let's do our first Ezri-centric episode with After Image, written by Renee Echeverria, directed by Les Lando. Ezri Dax has trouble adjusting with the rest of the crew. Garrick inexplicably collapses. It's kind of a weird synopsis, but this is kind of Ezri figuring out what she's gonna do with her life. She's gonna, as it turns out, become the station counselor, which they probably need one on DS9. Now they have Vic Fontaine and Ezri, so you have options to go, talk about your problems with someone. What do you think of this?
Fatheree, I'd mentioned, so I didn't know that was what her job was. That's how little I knew about Ezri. I thought she was just going to end up at some science station or something. And I had been slightly put off by a little bit of their kind of clapbacks on TNG, the counselors and stuff. Vic Fontaine talking to O'Brien, and O'Brien's like, "I never knew why we needed a counselor," and
that was Lisa Kuzak that
was that.
Yeah, that was in the sound of her voice.
Okay, well, fair enough. But anyway, there's that, and the fact that Vic Fontaine himself seemed to be kind of a commentary on that, hey, what if instead of someone telling you to get in touch with your feelings, a cool jazz man told you, hey, Pally, you need to get a tuxedo, and I was like, well, I don't know if I really like them kind of taking their knocks at therapists that hard, even if yes, TNG kind of did it lamely. So I was excited to see this. I'm like, oh, cool. Let's see what they can do. And it's interesting to me because I like it in premise, but I have to say I was a little disappointed by that she didn't get a better moment. I kind of thought, oh, the characters, I kind of didn't buy that she got Garrick where he needed to be through his claustrophobia and all that stuff.
See, that's where I have a little bit of a struggle with this episode, is some of the Ezri Garrick stuff where she's just like, oh, it's all just repressed guilt, and I don't know, it didn't seem like a real therapy session, or but
right, which of course you can't show in its entirety on a show like this, but you can, a good writer can give you some key moments and make it stand out.
Jill and our live audience is saying this episode pisses me off. People never get that Ezri is also mourning Jadzia's death. She deserves as much a break as everyone else who is close to Jadzia. Yeah, I do like that the episode, it shows her walk past the Bajoran temple and is like, oh, wow, I have memories of being murdered in that room. And just happened a few months ago. I don't know if I would say people are mean to her other than Garrick, who is very mean to her.
Yeah, Garrick lights into her, and Sisko drops the tough love bomb on her, right?
He does, yeah.
Yeah, that same thing that Picard would do every once in a while to Wes or somebody like that. And
Speaking of DS9 being the most Texan-y Star Trek, and I don't think it's particularly like that Texan-y. I just kind of, I mean, like the main character is from Louisiana, so they're our neighbors, and but there's a lot of love for the Alamo, and I love that like they're talking about including Odo, like he gets to be Santa Anna in their Alamo adventures, and
Yeah.
getting their Davy Crockett and Colonel Travis costumes from Garrick and stuff. But yeah, Garrick is not doing well. That depiction of his anxiety attack when like Odo is talking but it's muted.
Yeah.
That like as someone who has had like anxiety attacks, like that's a very realistic depiction of what it feels like.
Yeah, I thought this was a good concept. It was actually just a case where I thought their overall execution of like the therapy sessions that kind of, or inadvertent therapy sessions that ensued afterwards kind of fell flat a little bit. But yeah, his what's the actor who plays Garrick?
Andy Robinson.
Andy Robinson did a good job with it, of course.
Yeah, and even like his cruelty to Ezri, like, oh yeah, that feels appropriate for Garrick. It's similar way back in season 2, that episode The Wire that introduced the Nobran Tain. We didn't know that he was his father back then, but
Right.
when he was telling Bashir like oh, I will help you repair the device in his brain because I don't want him to die. I want him to like live in exile and be miserable so he can learn his lesson. But in that episode, Garrick was like super aggro towards Bashir when Bashir was trying to help him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like an established characteristic, and I like that.
Sure.
We do like see Ezri like do something.
By the way, nobody hates Garrick more than Garrick hates Garrick.
Yes,
And if you
yes.
try and get in the way of him hating himself, he'll fuck you up.
Yeah, and that is like a big deal. Like, oh yeah, like think about those 15 bases that got destroyed on the Cardassian border after their little shenanigans tricking the Romulans into the war way back in the pale moonlight. Imagine like how many Cardassians probably died from that, and Garrick just being like, "Yep, that is a direct result of what I did," and having to live with that. So it makes sense that he would he would be really struggling and would have a breakdown like this.
Right, and he doesn't like, even when he talks to Bashir, I get the impression that their conversations tend to be a little bit more surface. That Bashir picks him up at times, but it's not like he's going to go to Bashir and say, "I'm having a rough time." He's just that's not who he is. He's going to bury it.
Yeah. He's not open. He's not transparent. That's his most famous and obvious characteristic, right? It's like
Right.
which lies were which things are true, even the lies, especially the lies. Like it's like one of the most famous Star Trek memes. So yeah, he's not going to be upfront about anything. So speaking of Bashir, though, we have the Worf again being a jerk. It's like if Worf had like an ex and is like, I don't want to be in a relationship with you, but then like they see like their ex talking to someone else, and they're like, why are you talking to my ex? What are you doing?
Right. Yeah, there's a few notable sort of misunderstandings like this, and also some confusion in a later episode, I think, where Quark overhears. Was it? It's when Ezri is talking about Core, and he thinks that later. She's talking about Worf. Anyway,
we'll get to that later. But yeah, like Worf just saw Bashir and Ezri talking at the table, and to be fair, Bashir was getting a little flirty, and Ezri even. I love that moment too, and Ezri is like, please don't flirt with me. Jadzia knew how to handle it. I don't. Because, it shows kind of the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, but also it shows that she's got the wherewithal in her to establish a boundary. Mm-hmm. She's like, hey, I'm not good with this. Stop it.
And I think a lot of people, would relate to that. Because, like, oh, yeah, it can be, it's like, here's a guy he's probably like 10 years older than her. She's in like her early 20s. He's in his early 30s. He's a He's not just a doctor. He's like this like genetically engineered super doctor. And like, like he does seem like, a bit much. And like, if he's being flirty with her and she's like, it might have like some effect, I guess, if she's, it must be like kind of working. And she's like, no, stop. Like, this is too much.
Right.
I can't handle it.
Right. Well, is it this episode that where was the episode that they did kind of, she sort of dropped a little bit of an emotional bombshell on Bashir when she said, oh, if it hadn't been Worf that came along, it would have been you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that almost was cruel. That was that was maybe not a great thing to say.
Yeah, but I don't know. If I was Bashir, I would like, knowing that. I would feel validated by having heard that. Um,
Probably so. Probably so. They'd also,
we
but
saw
I
how
don't.
beat up he was about, like Jadzia's gonna spend her life with someone else, and then then he's like mourning her death. I think that would have helped add like some closure
I
to.
think for some people it would, and I guess he's supposed to be. The idea would be that that's what he's one of them. For some people, that would torment them forever. They were like, "Oh my God, I was this close to the woman who I was in, in utter infatuation with, at least, and she almost picked me. Oh shit, like that would haunt you."
And even with as big of a jerk as Worf is being in this episode, and I think it is inexcusable behavior. You shouldn't go throw your coworker up against the wall and yell at him to stay away from this
But we
other
kind of
woman.
allow
But
for that kind of exaggeration with Worf and with all the alien races in Star Trek when they do something that's like culturally their thing. Is
sure.
like, yeah, if it's not Starfleetish, it's kind of interesting and okay because it allows us to explore. Yeah, it's like stuff in our own world where
I mean, even
somebody.
in real, I mean, this is just me. I'm not blaming anyone else if they would react differently, but in real life, just between us humans in the 21st century, if I had a friend and his wife just died, and then like he reacted like that to me, a couple months later, I think I would kind of just get over it and be like, okay, that was wrong of him to do that, but he's struggling right now, but I do love that there's like kind of a justification for his behavior that not a justification, but there's a sympathetic nature to it of like he thought in these last two episodes that he did like this big grand thing of getting Jadzia into Stovo Core, like that was finally going to give him his closure. But now it's like, oh, this new woman is walking around with Jadzia's memories with her last name, and it's just like no, like Jadzia is gone. She died and went to Stovokor, and you existing kind of like ruins me having like this as close as I can have to like a perfect closure on this
Right.
big part of my life. So I can understand that frustration from his end, but Ezri does talk to him. It's like, look, they get this understanding at the end. Like, I'll stay on the station. I'll give you some space. And he raises the cup of blood wine at the end when they're celebrating her promotion to lieutenant. And
For a minute I was like, that's kind of cheesy, but I also was
it
like,
is, but
that is like a big hashtag life goals kind of thing. Is like if you get the toast, the raised cup from Worf, that's pretty big.
mm.
That's something.
And this is a very small detail, but I think it's kind of cool. Is that the opening credits of these first three episodes of season 7? They say Ensign Ezri Dax, and then
Hmm.
after this episode, they actually change it to Lieutenant Ezri Dax.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice touch. By the way, in the comments, Jill was asking a little ways back if Garrick was indeed helped by Ezri, and like initially no, but I believe the ultimate outcome was that it did help him process, right? In the same way that she also helped Worf.
Yeah, I mean, I think she fails at first,
She does.
obviously, but then I think their second time when
Because
when they
when
interact,
she's with him at the very end, he kind of gives her also the nod of approval, the
Mhm.
slight smile in the hospital, the "I'm doing okay. They're sending me some reports," which Federation wants him to do all this intelligence work for them, so she has in fact
I mean, he's not
helped
trying to
him.
jump out of airlocks, in the next episode, so
Right.
it seems like it helped
Yeah.
them.
Right. I
But
didn't love necessarily how they got there, but I understood that the writers that was the intent.
my only other comment on this episode, I believe, is I love so much that big, joyous, surprised belly laugh that Avery Brooks gives when Cisco is told that he intimidates Worf.
Yeah, yeah, that was fantastic. He's like, I intimidate him. It's- yeah, it's sometimes that like those really there's those very real reactions. There's one a few episodes later. I don't know. Oh, I know. I think it's when Quark has decided he is in love with Ezri,
Mm-hmm.
and Jake gives him like a little hell for it. and it just felt so natural, right? Just like really like just kind of busting the balls of
Yeah.
a
You're
friend.
certifiable, I believe what
Yeah,
Jake
and just
says.
his physical mannerisms and all that, like it had that feeling of like easygoing friendship that and it made the characters felt like 100% natural, the same way Cisco did responding to that.
And there will be some more Ezri-centric episodes that we discuss next week.
Hey, Father, is there any Star Trek memorabilia with Worf raising the Stein?
No, but there should be. That's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
they should
So
get on that.
let's make that into a meme or something.
I agree.
Like something
It
just
should
like
be.
just as like some shitty meme that's just like something like some stupid thing that like people share just because they like Worf and like start just be like just be the person Worf would
Well,
toast, like something like that.
it's perfect for memeing because all it is a seal of approval. So somebody just has to make a good
Oh
comment. You give them the Worf
yeah,
raise.
Worf approves.
Yeah,
Okay. Uh,
we'll work on it.
Well, let's move on to season 7, episode 4, "Take Me Out to the Holosuite," written by Ronald D. Moore, directed by Chip Chalmers. When Captain Solok of the Federation starship Tecumseh challenges former classmate Cisco and his crew to a game of baseball, Cisco refuses to lose to the arrogant Vulcan and begins to take the game too seriously. This is a very famous episode of Deep Space Nine. I think it's a lot of fun, but what do you think seeing it for the first time, Dave?
I liked it. I liked it even like I'd say quite a bit, but I wasn't maybe in love with it. And I don't know if it's like I'm not a baseball guy in particular, but I also like I've liked baseball movies and stuff before, so it's
Mm-hmm.
not a huge thing. And I like as a kid I kind of bonded with like that '70s movie, The Bad News Bears, which they compared to Solok's team, Vulcan team, the Logicians. That's which is an amazing name, by the way. That's
Yes.
basically what they were. They were the Bad News Bears, the guys who just like got owned over and over. And I had a lot of fun with it. Father, as a little quick side story, I was telling a coworker about this episode, and they were like, I think was it like he was wondering if like when they play I was like, yeah, I just watched a Deep Space Nine episode where they play baseball, and he's like, oh, is it like in the X-Men when they do that sometimes where they're just kind of blowing off steam? And I was like, no, it's for revenge. And then I told him the deal. I mean, of course that's the arc, but this is another one where I felt like everybody, like, it's fun to watch people have fun, and I felt like everybody was having a lot of fun in this. They got to dress in like varying shades of casual and baseball uniform, and they got to do a lot of physical comedy. They got to kind of do a little bit larger than life kind of comedy. It's a super fun episode.
I like
And I
it a
like
lot.
Solok, by the way. I think he's a good villain.
It's weird how much like Cisco reminds me of my dad in this episode. Like I actually like put in my notes when Cisco comes into the dugout and he's like yelling at them like y'all gotta get your shit together and play to win. It's like, oh yeah, like that's how like my dad coached sports. But I come from a baseball family. I was never much of a baseball player myself. I couldn't bat worth a shit, so I was a terrible baseball player, and I didn't have a good enough arm to pitch, and I didn't want to be a catcher. So it just wasn't my sport. But my dad and my uncle and my granddad all played for a softball team, and I'm from Rockdale, Texas. They'd have like these softball games, and they would play like teams from other nearby small towns in Central Texas. So they were the Rockdale Roadrunners, because we used to have like a lot of roadrunners in this part of the country until fire ants showed up in the '80s and killed them all. But
Yeah, fire ant's a big problem in Texas.
yeah, that's probably no pun intended. That's probably like more inside baseball than anyone wanted to hear. But anyways, my point is like yeah, just
I
like
like that you could use the inside baseball metaphor, and it's 100% not a metaphor.
but just the idea of like adults having like these casual baseball games and some people taking it too seriously. It seems very familiar to me. I loved the umpire Odo. I thought that was like such like a perfect idea. I was like,
Yeah.
of course, you would have Odo as the umpire. Like, why
Yeah,
wouldn't you
yeah.
do that?
Him practicing for it was great, and I loved like him shutting down Cisco. I mean, that was amazing. Like,
Yes.
I was like, oh no, is this about to turn serious?
Just his response when he's like, "Look it up in the rule book, but do it in the stands. You're out."
What was I gonna say? I of course early on I was like, I thought I was like, did I forget who Solok is? I'm like, he's clearly like there's a rivalry. I'm like, was this some season 1 or 2 episode and I'm just forgetting it? So I was as much hankering to hear it as Cassidy was later on.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite, I thought the funniest moments was when he tells her the deal and he's like, you can't tell them. And then she's like, okay, he said I can't tell you.
Yes. That type of like smash cut thing, by the way, they did that.
Yeah.
They did that in season 6 also, when Martok is like, a year from now we'll be drinking blood wine together in the Central Command on Cardassia Prime, and then it cuts to Central Command on Cardassia Prime. Like, they did that like a couple times on DS9, and Joss Whedon must have been watching this, because then he was like, you know what, I love that, I'm going to do it a shitload of times in all of my TV shows.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing.
But yeah, then I think Buffy and Angel made it, more popular, and
Somebody mentioned in the comments, Quark's Bar says, season 7 really set the stage for asshole Vulcans before Enterprise ever got to them.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, I absolutely, I put that down in my notes. I was like, oh, this, like I know that that kind of seemed to some people, and including to me who hadn't seen this episode, a kind of a jarring take on Vulcans, although I've actually always liked it. I always thought it was a neat idea to show that, a couple hundred years earlier, they were a couple hundred years. Is that? Yeah, they they were going through some growth as a species as well, and but it's especially cool that this episode does kind of set that up. That yes, there can be patriarchal Vulcans, and Vulcans can be mean. It even fits with like Spock's early childhood experiences and stuff.
Sisko and Solok is very much the archetype the prototype, I guess I should say, of what they will do with Archer and Saval a few years later on Star Trek Enterprise.
Yep.
And I just like Sisko got like this Captain Pike Medal of Valor. It's really cool that like Captain Pike's a big deal now. That it's cool that like there's this award named after him. But then Solok is like, Solok's like, I got 2 of them. So I do almost wish that they had like a Solok redemption after. We never see him again, but wouldn't it be cool if like during the war or something, like he actually is like, okay, this guy is a jerk, but like he was like really cool when we needed him to do something big and heroic here.
Well, they made out. Didn't they say that he and his ship had been like kicking some ass?
Yeah, the Tecumber. This would have been the perfect ending for Solok, is that like they need like some like big ship to go in and like self-sacrifice or something, and then Solok is like, my crew on the Tecumber will do this, but by the way, when they present my 3rd Captain Pike Medal of Valor to my grieving wife and children back on Vulcan, I want Captain Sisko to like deliver the speech at that ceremony. That would have been his ultimate revenge.
They of course play it pretty light, but if he's like constantly writing essays about like his species superiority, that's actually horrific. I know that the writers didn't really intend it to be that way. They wanted him to be egocentric, but I don't think necessarily racist.
Well, the Rom stuff with Rom being the worst player, and but Sisko kind of learning like, oh yeah, like baseball should be about fun. I'm gonna put this guy in. He just wants to play a game with his son, and like that's all I wanted to do. That's what baseball should be. I like all that stuff, but the irony of it is Max Grodenchuk is actually a really good baseball player. Like the team he was on in high school, like they almost won like some national championship or something. Like it's like they're like really good. Like
so he had to play it being a doofus.
Yeah, like I think like he could have even like gone to baseball professionally, but he chose acting instead.
That's fantastic.
So I don't know if this is true or not. I've heard conflicting things, but I think like some of the stuff, like he might have been like throwing the ball with like his opposite hand or something, like, 'cause, like his mechanics were down so well. It was hard to like not look like he knew how to play baseball. But the Rom bunt that doesn't even win the game. It just like they scored a single run, and that's what they're celebrating at the end.
This is one of my favorite sort of things in, I guess, like sports movies. And it's arguably it's the original Rocky even did this. He doesn't win.
Mm.
It's like a draw or whatever. But he went the distance, right? Or they made a mark. They personally showed that they got heart or whatever. That's like all my favorite sports stuff tends to be that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily need a win. Um,
Yeah, there's a good message to it, and I just it's such a well-deserved victory and earned victory, even if it is a manufactured victory. But I just love how they ruin Solok's fun because he is an asshole. Like imagine man, this guy loves baseball, so you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get like a crew of Vulcans to go just beat the ever-loving dog shit out of him in the thing that he loves most. Like what a jerk move to do! Like
yeah. Every once in a while, Cisco is a little egotistical and could use a little taking down a peg or two. But yes, this is extreme. This is vengeful and kind of cruel. It's funny, but which, by the way, one of the many things that I appreciated in this was also Worf's death to the opposition, and when they're like all swinging bada.
Yeah, when Nog is too much of a goofy ass to tell the Vulcans apart, and he's like, he didn't touch home, like who should I tag? And and Worf is just like, find him and kill him.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And yet, inexplicably, even though as silly as it is, I suddenly found myself a little teary-eyed when I saw the signed baseball at the end of it. I was like, oh, that's a beautiful image.
And I think every actor signed their character signature on there.
Mm-hmm.
The coolest thing is that the Quark signature on there, if you look, there's like these big ears on the Q. That's how Armin Shimmerman signs his name. If you go get an autograph from him at a convention or something, he puts the Ferengi ears on the A in Armin.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, does he ever, like, do that on accident? Like, if he's, like, writing a check or something, or he's, signing, like, some paperwork for something important. Like, does he ever, like, do that?
Only his banker knows for sure.
I don't know if I have anything else to say on the baseball fun and games, but
yeah, it's a fun episode. It's very legit. So shall we move on to the return of the genetic 4?
Yes. So let's move on to season 7, episode 5, Chrysalis, and check in on Bashir's augment buddies. This episode written by Renee Echeverria, directed by Jonathan West. Jack, Lauren, Patrick, and Serena, the genetically engineered humans, return to the station asking Bashir to help rouse Serena from her cataleptic state. So Dave, I don't think you knew that these people were coming back, did you?
Nope.
I might have.
Nope.
I teased. I said there's going to be some more augment stuff in season 7.
Right. No, I think you successfully covered your tracks, and I successfully did not intuit anything past that. So I was surprised, and I was happy to see him back. To be honest, this episode is just an okay episode to me. I think it's not what it could have been, but I was happy to spend time with these characters again, even though there's a subconscious part of me that's like, this representation of mental health is pretty, larger than life. It's kind of like 4 Rain Mans in a room of different thematic Rain Mans, but. I like I always like the intention with them. I like the portrayals of them. I think they work fun as a unit and also individually. So I like the characters. I enjoyed the ride, even though it was, again, just a so-so episode.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's kind of an episode that could have been in like any season. It's not really like anything of consequence. It's just like, oh, like Bashir, falls in love, but it ends badly, and it's like, okay, we've kind of done that story before. But
arguably, this one I also thought like it's pretty sketch to do, that kind of quick romance with a patient. I know they do the sort of perfunctory. I've given her, passed her on to another doctor. But
I appreciated that because, they took the time to actually.
Sure, that is forward thinking for the 90s. But like, she was your patient like 2 hours ago, dude, and also clearly has like this debt of gratitude. There's a pretty big power imbalance. It's kind of skeevy.
Yeah, but they kind of bring that up at the end. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah,
she's just like
he
confused
recognizes, he was
yeah.
like, "Oh my god, what was I thinking?" And we know that they showed what he was thinking. He was feeling lonely and left out. Everybody else was having their
Oh
date
yeah.
nights, and he was not. He was not. And I'm like, well, that's probably not a necessarily good excuse for manipulating somebody into dating you. But
He didn't.
that's the
I don't
harsh
think he
spin on it.
manipulated her though. I think he had like these genuine feelings, and she didn't. And he
Well,
recognized that and was like, "Oh well."
realistically, someone who has literally just come out of some, essentially being nonverbal is not somebody you say like, "Hey, let's try dating." You know, I know it's a heightened reality of the show. I don't require that it follow all the rules of reality, but that's that's a little sketch.
Okay. I don't know. I thought it felt pretty realistic and natural.
Like, would I have his like feelings if I was in that same spot? Yeah, I could easily see that. Doctors fall in love with patients, psychiatrists, I'm sure, or therapists. It happens all the time. They just gotta like tune it out, and sometimes they don't. But yeah, to me, it just feels like something that hasn't aged great, even though I think it was probably forward thinking for when it came out. But
I love Admiral Patrick. I love like that's how they got all the way over there. It was just like that's a stupid
yeah.
question.
And this guy got to have his day. I forget everybody's name except for Jack.
Jack, Patrick, Serena, and Lauren.
Patrick, yeah. But you know what I like about these characters? That they all back each other up, and they care about each other. They kind of abide by each other's quirks. Occasionally snark about them, but I think they're a fun quartet.
A lot of people give their previous appearance episode a hard time because they're like, it's wrong that the Federation locks these people up just for being genetically engineered. And that's not why it's not like they're in prison. They're hospitalized in an institute because they can't function in society on their own. And I think this episode actually, if people who didn't pick up on that previously, it shows here like, yeah, they're actually like very dangerous. They don't use good judgment. If for some reason, if you didn't think them trying to turn over intelligence to the Dominion was a big enough reason to show like why they shouldn't be independent actors just running around doing whatever they want. I think this episode kind of also explains why okay, they need like professionals keeping an eye on these people.
They can break out of anything.
Yeah.
They can impersonate Starfleet officers with no trouble at all. Also, by the way, in the comments, Quarks Bar says that referring to them as quartet because of their musical number, which we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that. It's definitely an episode highlight. It's a very fun their do re mi sequence.
Yeah, they have to like do things to remind us like, oh yeah, these people are like enhanced. They do have some like superior abilities. So I guess like the singing, Jack, flipping around all the time. They repair the machine that O'Brien was like, oh yeah, there's no way I can make this machine do what you need it to do. And they're like, oh well, we can. So
yeah, honestly, Fatheree, did you say they've shown up in like some of the books or something like that? Because I
don't know.
I'll look into that. I'll see, because I think I'd like to see the characters again. They seem fun. I think I'm like somewhat impressed with the restraint of who's the sort of femme fatale of them.
Lauren,
right, the seductress.
Yeah.
That she, although I think she tried to like seduce Bashir, and it kind of didn't take.
Well, now she likes Nog. Now she's like, oh yeah, that cute little Ferengi ensign.
Good for Nog. Everybody should like Nog. But like I felt like they actually didn't. They actually could have been more exploitive and kind of cheesy about that, and like like they could have had her sleeping with all the guys on the station, or just not ever turning it off, and she does turn it off, and so I actually like appreciate that about their decisions with her.
She helped Serena get dressed and look cute for their I guess big date to go meet like Bashir's friends and stuff. I love that conversation that she has when she's kind of describing everyone, when she's like, oh, if I had to pick someone to replace Atlas and hold up the world, it would be Miles, and he would do it with a smile. Or as soon as Ezri figures out she's more than just the sum of her parts, she's going to be really great. And and just like the way that she picked up on like the Kira and Odo stuff, and
Speaking of Joss Whedon influence, you think there might have been a little River song? Is that her? No, that River song is Doctor Who. River Tam, right? Is that the name?
yeah, she's in Firefly.
In Firefly. Do you think there might have been
Lau's character,
a little influence on River Tam with this? Because
Maybe.
like that's sort of the I like those quick assessments from her like sort of genius brain. Kind of reminded me of the Firefly episode where she very perfectly assesses Bajor, their fence. Anyway, like I thought good performances by everybody. But just could have been better. Would have liked a slightly more intriguing hook.
Well, let's move on to Season 7, Episode 6, Treachery, Faith, and the Great River. Teleplay by David Weddle and Bradley Thompson. Story by Philip Kilm. Directed by Steve Posey. Odo is contacted by Weyoun, who reveals that he wants to defect to the Federation. Meanwhile, O'Brien and Nog sell the Great Material Continuum. Dave, let's talk about the Odo stuff first, then we'll do the O'Brien and Nog stuff second. But
sure.
Odo goes to meet his Cardassian informant that we saw before way back in season 3. It was Improbable Cause, or the die is cast. Improbable Cause. Remember when he met like that dude in the cave, that Cardassian guy?
Yeah.
He's like the next time you meet me, I might have a different face, or something like that. So
that's right.
I assume that was Gol Rusal. It might have been a different Cardassian informant. We don't know how many contacts Odo has, but it looks like the same place. But yeah, he gets this Weyoun surprise where Weyoun's like, I want to defect, and then it's like, oh, the Weyoun defector is defective.
That was this is actually this or maybe the next episode are my favorite of this initial 8 of the season. I really like this. What a great showcase for Jeffrey Combs.
You liked seeing a man eat a pizza by stabbing the pepperoni with a chopstick and then being like, "Oh, I couldn't even taste it. I was just eating it for the texture."
That's that little bit of trivia about them is just one more, that totally fits everything we know about the Vorta not being able to enjoy aesthetics and things like that. They are meant to do their job and not really appreciate life.
I like the peek into Vorta culture that we get here through Weyoun 6. This is Weyoun 6. Weyoun 5 was the previous one. We got to talk about his death in a minute. But so this is 6, and then his replacement back on Cardassia Prime is Weyoun 7. But yeah, Weyoun 6, he's the nice one that we kind of like. But when he talks about the origin of the Vorta and how there's this whole like creation myth of how like we protected one of the changelings and our reward was to be their servants forever and genetically engineered to not have sex or taste food, and how lucky are we? And it's like, that's actually terrible that was your reward. But
right, but when you it's kind of like in 1984, when you remove the vocabulary, in the newspeak or whatever, then people can't even think of resistance. And yeah, the Vorta are just like, oh, this is how things are supposed to be. So why would I think something else is good? It's just it is what it is.
We get the important information from him of the there's something wrong with the Founders. They're sick.
Right. When I saw that earlier, I thought it was actually just going to be some minor thing like, there's some, what do you call it? Damar is testing, higher temperatures to see if he can test a little power play against them. I didn't realize that it was actually meant to signal like sickness.
And I like that Odo, being like so reluctant to tolerate Weyoun, but Weyoun is genetically programmed and conditioned to like worship the Founders and obey the Founders. Is this funny to see like Odo being uncomfortable with being this god being in Weyoun's eyes and just being uncomfortable with being worshipped basically?
Well, it brought into focus something that has been, I thought, one of the great deals with like sort of the complicated power balance that they've had really since we found out about the Founders and the Vorta and all that, and the Dominion, which is, Odo is actually kind of off limits. He's kind of untouchable, and Weyoun is going to consider him a god. And that just makes things complicated. Then the Cardassians have to kind of find these workarounds, and it means that their own allies within the in the Cardassian Dominion alliance, that they're going to be at odds with each other. So this kind of just brought that like to its kind of ultimate fruition. Where do they stand? Will a Vorta go after a founder if the stakes are high enough? And we see they will. That they have to go through some mental gymnastics to get there. It has to be, Odo doesn't consider himself a founder. Okay.
Right.
And also it's just like this could mean the war. And so, he's like, yeah, he's what is that? That's Weyoun 7?
Weyoun 7, yeah, because they don't want Weyoun 6 to defect and have all these secrets and everything. They don't really explain like how do these clones, like I guess there's some way like they like transfer their memories from like the previous Weyoun to the new Weyoun. It's very like Cylon, like Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
You kill a Cylon, then like a new one wakes up with all of the old one's memories and stuff like that. So almost as if that show was created by one of the writers from this show. It seems to happen a lot.
Sure.
When we talk
Writers
about
have
these
their
episodes,
they have their thematics.
But the scene between Weyoun 7 and Damar on Cardassia, when Weyoun 7 is just like, the Weyoun 5 was killed by a transporter accident that just so happened he was the only one beaming. Damar wasn't there. Damar called in sick on that day. That was very sus. And just seeing their faces, like how Damar and Weyoun are like looking at each other during that, and just it was perfect and lovely, and it just like like these guys that work together, but Damar, like we knew they kind of don't like each other. Like Damar actually assassinated Weyoun 5. Like
yeah. It took me until like this batch of episodes to start seeing Damar kind of more as his own man, even though he had these moments in the previous season. But like this, like Damar as an interesting antagonist has been growing on me. I can't tell where he's going to end up. I really, it's kind of unpredictable.
So I've watched this episode many, many times. I've seen it. I always say 47th time watching DS9. I think I did the math. This is the 9th time that I recall watching this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I had never thought of this before this week, but when Odo has the idea to hide the runabout from the Jem'Hadar ships in the ice, in the comets or whatever, when he says like we become the ice and we power down and they won't be able to pick us up with their scans.
Yeah.
That is such a shapeshifter idea. That's a changeling idea. Like, we become the ice to blend in, to camouflage.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it. It's not uncommon to hide in an asteroid belt. Empire Strikes Back, Last Starfighter did that kind of stuff. But yes, you're right. It's completely thematic when Odo does it, and he is even kind of doing it in a different way. He's like, the way he frames it is like, changeling think.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of like justifies Weyoun's like big raise. Like, of course, only a god would think. It's like, okay, kiss ass. Like, it's not actually like that ingenious of an idea. Only a god could think of it. But framing it that way, to me, it kind of like justifies Weyoun's worship of Odo's idea of like, oh, what a glorious idea. The death scene is was a big moment for me. I'm like, I remember watching this and being like, wow, I can't believe like I'm sad that Weyoun is dying. Never thought I would see that. And then what really sells it is like Odo's reaction when Weyoun 8 or I'm sorry, Weyoun 7 is like oh, I'm so sorry that we were a bother, Odo. Would you like one of these Jem'Hadar ships to assist you? Does your runabout need any repairs or anything? Is there anything we can do for you? He's just like, you've done enough already. But just like Odo's anger.
Yeah.
At seeing this.
I love the weirdness of that scene, that they should be like hunting them so hardcore and then suddenly turn deferential. That is some intense emotional dragging of the audience. It's like it's harsh in a good way. And yeah, like obviously that's an emotional scene. I felt that the idea of Odo having to bend so that this guy's dying moment isn't filled with terror and confusion. It's that it's some sort of sense of I did the right thing. Somebody approved of me. Yeah, that's incredibly touching.
I don't want to spoil the moment for anyone who hasn't seen it, but Galaxy Quest
Mm.
had a big moment like that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's a good point. It's yeah. Well, maybe one of the great scenes in that movie
In
for
fact,
sure.
now I'm starting to question like which one came out first, because these are both around this. Actually,
I believe this would have preceded Galaxy
it
Quest.
would have, yeah.
Yeah,
And the people who made that obviously had watched some Star Trek, so
yeah. I
just,
want to say probably so.
it's a great moment in that movie. I'm not blaming them or anything, but just saying. Uh,
Oh, by the way, I
the
thought all those special effects I thought were really cool too. Just in general, the asteroids, the squadron of Dominion ships, and all that stuff. Just there's some cool shots in there.
the O'Brien stuff, the Great River. Jill in our live audience is saying, I love the scene where Nog talks about the Great River, great world building. Ferengi culture was actually based on a pretty cool concept once upon a time. It's like, yeah, I love seeing like Nog. He's a good dude. He's functional in Starfleet. He's very dedicated Starfleet officer. We'll talk about like how dedicated he is in a moment in an upcoming episode, but he's still a Ferengi. They never forget, his Ferengi side. I love that.
That comes up. Well, probably best in this episode. I'm glad Jill brought it up. I made note of it for sure while I was watching the episode because I thought it was the best metaphor and the best kind of deep cut I'd ever seen on sort of how Ferengis might lens their culture, not as just a kind of a sometimes one note joke that's just a kind of a bit of a goof on capitalism, hardcore capitalism, but as like actually as like a somewhat poetic thing where it's this river of like everybody of trade and interaction, and you're trying to chart the best path, the
And
most
he's good at it.
prosperous path.
Nog's pretty good. He learned from his uncle. He's able to.
Right.
He got. O'Brien is just like so terrified. He's like, I lost the captain's desk. Now we lost General Martok's blood wine. And then Nog had the desk back in time. He had the better blood wine when Martok's like, this is even better than my wife's stuff. This is the 2309. That keeps getting mentioned too, the 2309 blood wine. For the
Okay.
rest of the show, Martok has this badass 2309 blood wine that everyone loves.
Oh, nice. That's actually very cool. That's a neat detail.
It's like the best year for blood wine ever, apparently.
I feel like, by the way, this plot, the subplot with Nog and his like convoluted horse trading, must be like based on some classic movie or a Shakespeare play or something. But I couldn't quite guess what it was. Doesn't really matter. It's just I was like, is this like from some old Frank Capra movie or something? I don't know.
I kind of want to meet Al Lorenzo now that we have like all these new Star Trek shows in production. I want to meet like this weirdo who like takes pictures behind famous people's desks.
That was great. That felt so prescient about like kind of like fandom and kind of like quirky selfies and stuff that
Sure.
people do now.
Well, if you live in a society where you have replicators, you can create any like material object, or you can go on like the holodeck and like experience anything you can imagine there. It's like, what would be like the precious little collectibles and stuff that you could. It's like, oh yeah, like there's only one Captain Picard's desk. There's only one Captain DeSoto's desk. That was Riker's CO on the hood, by the way, from the Next Generation. So. Good,
Right.
good continuity there. But yeah, so it's like it makes sense. Okay, like these famous iconic things, you get your holo photo taken with them. It's like yeah, I kind of buy that. That seems like a realistic thing for the 24th century depicted in Star Trek.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else on the Great River before we move on to some Klingon action?
I have never. I don't have like a good list of these in my head, but I feel like of the various trapped in a shuttlecraft with somebody episodes, this might be my favorite.
Oh, that's a good point. I think it helps that it also has like a good B story. This might be too silly for some people, but I really enjoy the Nog O'Brien stuff. So
I found it slightly repetitive after a while of like everybody like getting O'Brien getting busted over and over, but it was fun. It was fun.
So, moving on to Once More Into the Breach, written by Ronald D. Moore, directed by Alan Craker. With the Dominion War raging, the old Klingon warrior Kor feels left out of the action and looks for some way to get his share of the honor of battle. However, his efforts to play a part are stymied by Martok, who holds a grudge against Kor. So a good Kor episode, good Martok episode. Dave, this is the last appearance of the first Klingon. What do you think about it?
Oh man, this vies with the previous episode for my favorite. Obviously, when Ron Moore writes in episodes where Klingons sing, I'm on board.
Yes, hell yeah.
Soldiers of the Empire being a favorite previous episode. And you know what I liked is Martok is, like, I feel 100% in the right. Like, he got hosed by a classist old bastard of a Klingon, and is deservedly angry. And I love that the arc took him to a place where he could get his revenge, and it would be hollow. That's some writing there.
And even more Alamo talk. They start off. This is a pretty famous scene where they're talking about, the legendary Davy Crockett. Did he surrender? Did he go down fighting? Growing up in Texas and as a fan of Texas history, it's something that has been talked a lot about, all my life around here. But yeah, I like Worf's response. If you believe in the legend, then you must believe that he died heroically. If you don't believe in the legend and think he was just a man, then it does not matter how he died. Which, if you think about that, okay, that actually doesn't make sense, but it sounds really cool.
It sounds like that's a cool Klingon axiom, and when Worf says it, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, the way that Ron Moore worded it and the way Michael Dorn delivered it sold it for me.
Well, Father, this continues the sort of Alamo talk that you'd brought up in the last time we were talking about DS9, and it has a very direct bearing on the episode because this is about the legacy of Kor, who of course I also love Kor. He's great in his return appearance was great in what was the episode with Dax?
Well, he'd been in 2 previous DS9 episodes. He was in Blood Oath in Season 2, and then in Season 4, he was in The Sword of Kahless, where he met Worf.
That's right. Okay, yeah, I forgot about that one. And of course TOS. And
Errand of Mercy, of course.
Great performances every time by that actor. He
John
carries
Colicos.
that venerable quality. He's got a powerful voice, and I liked his explanation of his own life, where he's like. He's like, oh, maybe I have been a little too aggressive. Maybe I was too egotistical or, whatever. But he's also has become a legend. And so he gets to experience the pleasures of that with the sort of the hero worship and the utter bottoming out fall when he kind of has an incident of senility in a battle, which is heartbreaking. That's a great point,
though. The pressure is really on. You get the rewards, but also the cons of that. It's you're this great badass, but you know what that means? All eyes are on you, and if you fuck up, it's 10 times worse.
Right. They went from. It looked like, oh, why can't you be a better man, Martok? Look at, like that's how the crew might have been thinking about it because they're like, oh, the great Dahar warrior. But yeah, when they turn on him, that scene, Ron Moore, I think, is pretty good at writing scenes where somebody dresses somebody down.
Oh, that's weird. I can't hear Dave anymore. So I don't know if people in the chat, let me know if you can still hear him or what's going on. But I'll just take over for a bit until he returns. I assume people can hear me, right? If someone can reply in the live audience and let me know. But okay, Quark Spar says we lost Dave. Well, hopefully he returns in a moment. But this is one that I also really, really enjoy. I'm always a sucker for the Klingon stuff, so that's an easy get for me. Dave, let me know if you're back.
I think I might be back.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I caught the glitches, so you continue, and I'll quick reiterate my point in a minute.
I like that, Kor gets this big send off. But to me, it even kind of validates the Dominion War as being, look how important this is to the timeline of Star Trek history, of the big important events in the Star Trek universe. This original Klingon who who had to face off against Kirk and Spock. He is seen fighting and dying in the Dominion War. I just love that. I love that use of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But what were you saying before we lost you to some subspace
I
interference?
I think I forgot what I was saying now.
Oh yeah, you had a core moment also.
Yes, I did. Do you remember what we were talking about specifically about like Core and the crew? It may pop into my head.
Ron Moore is particularly good at writing
Oh.
scenes of like a character being dressed down.
Yeah, the scene the other scene I mentioned, and you could also like the Way of the Warrior is one, but also the one where Wesley disappoints Picard back in TNG at the
First
Academy.
Duty.
The First Duty. He writes those kind of painfully awkward scenes really well. That's all.
Maybe Ron Moore got like chewed out by his parents a lot or something like that. I don't know.
Maybe so, but it's
maybe he
also
has some
like
real life experience with that.
to some degree, I think it's also just something that on Star Trek sometimes you want to shy away from, because you do want a little bit of that Roddenberry high concept of people getting along, and I think that the being a little bit painful sometimes is something I like to see in Trek. Not all the time, but I think it's occasionally important to show that link between us and the future.
That moment when Core is being mocked at the mess hall when Martok is making fun. Oh, you thought we were at Caleb 4? That's a Federation base. Like, what a dumbass! You don't even know who our allies are or who our enemies are. And just the way that John Calicos plays that, like he can still do like the big eccentric Core who's all like going crazy from the bloodlust of battle, but then here he can do like the more like subdue thing where it's like, okay, you're just a guy who just feels like a stupid old man being ridiculed and made fun of, and this is just
and there's nothing
torture.
He can say. There's not a word he can say.
There's nothing you can say or do but just sit here and take it. Although when he does finally get up and leaves the room, he has that awesome line of dialogue.
It's super good. Yeah, I jotted it down, of course, because it was like too good.
Savor the fruit of life, my young friends. It has a sweet taste when it is fresh from the vine, but don't live too long.
The taste turns bitter.
The taste turns
time.
bitter after a time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that. I mean, great line. Very Shakespearean, honestly.
I like Ron Moore's current show, For All Mankind. I think it's my favorite non-Star Trek show in production right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't watch a ton of non-Star Trek TV, but what I do, it's number one. And I kind of miss I like you doing like this very like human, grounded, real world stuff. Like I liked it when like you wrote dialogue for like these warrior aliens and stuff like that. Like,
yeah. I always remember this quote from the comic writer Alan Moore, when I think he was moving towards somewhat more realistic novels and stuff, and away from superheroes and Swamp Thing and all that. He said something like, when he's like, when I was young, I liked to write about big, exciting things, and he's like, now that I'm older, I feel like I've sort of outgrown them, or something like that. And so, yeah, I think there is a certain like that the adventure and the high drama, really and heightened drama, is something of a young man's game. People, if you live long enough, you get a little more contemplative, I think, and you get a little more thoughtful, and those that you just don't feel as instinctive a need to hit those kind of moments.
In our live audience, Quark's Bar is pointing out that Klingons love them some Shakespeare. So yeah, Core was kind of doing some Shakespearean level dialogue there. He has a fanboy on the. Well, he's got like a few fans on the ship. But
wasn't the title of this from like Henry the Fifth or something like that? Once more under the breach, dear friends, or I'm gonna butcher it, but something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought it was a different Shakespeare play, but yeah, it's one of them.
I think it is Henry V.
Okay,
but
I was thinking Macbeth, but those are I get those two kind of mixed up a lot. They're both about like king stuff, and I don't know.
But there's like the big epic battles are in Henry V, and that's got the we Band of Brothers and stuff in it too.
One of the fans that Core has on the ship is a Darok, who like his name just seems like the Klingon version of Derek to me, which I think is kind of appropriate because he's supposed to be kind of like this kind of like boring old dude. He's like Martok's aide. He's like he does like some the administrative stuff.
Somewhat put upon aide.
And and he doesn't get along great with Martok, but I like that he's the one. He like goes to Kor and tells him about like, oh, this plan, like, Worf is going to go try to take this bird of prey into action to cover our escape. And then Kor ends up, doing it. And he gets like the big heroic death himself that he wanted. And Martok being forced to at the very end when they're just like, how the hell did he do it? And, we don't see it. It's like the bank robbery in Reservoir Dogs. It all happens off screen. It's like somehow he found a way to hold back those Jem'Hadar ships. And, he Martok doesn't sing with them, but he starts pouring the blood wine and passes it around, and like he's like, okay, like I still don't like him. I'm still holding a grudge because of what he did to me and did to my dad. But he deserves this moment of people to celebrate him.
Yeah, it's super good, and I think it's like it's pretty genius to leave it off screen. That's a vital, I think, element of the episode.
The idea of like Martok not singing, that was J.G. Hertzler's idea, and he actually had like a few contributions to this. The idea of like his father had like always wanted his son to become an officer, and Martok is like this commoner. I love all that stuff about Martok, that he's even Worf came from like this aristocratic wealthy family. He lost all of it. He didn't get to grow up with that because of the Romulans killed his parents, and he had to go live with his human foster parents on Earth. But Martok didn't have none of that. He didn't have no silver spoon. He had to work his way up. He couldn't even enlist after he had the black mark from Kor. He had to join a ship as a civilian laborer and then
get a battlefield commission.
Yeah, get a battlefield commission
by doing apparently some crazy shit back when.
Yeah, not only is he a general, but he's in command of the war. When they retook the station, Galron made Martok in charge of like the entire like Klingon forces fighting on the front. So he's kind of like the highest ranking dude in the military now, and he had to like earn all of that himself. Nothing was handed to him. But J.G. Hertzler had the idea of when he did actually become an officer, it was too late for his dad to see it. His dad had already died.
Yeah.
That's something that very rarely happens in Berman era Star Trek, where they like change something to the script. Like it's infamous how like many times like actors would like get like a line reading wrong. They'll just say like instead of saying like we cannot do that, they'll say like we can't do that or something like that. Just a small little thing. It's like, no, you had to be exactly to the script every single line in every single episode. So the fact that like J.G. Hertzler is like, what if I just throw in this line that like my dad didn't live long enough to see this, and then the producers had to be called up on the phone, and then Ron Moore, the writer, had to be called, like all this stuff, all this back and forth, and then they're like,
something about it resonated with enough people that they were like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that was cool, and I don't know, I don't think I have anything else other than
That's a quick mention. One thing about like the B plot.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna get into that in a second. Just okay. Last thing I have on like the A story is when Kor is like going crazy and like ordering them to like raid the station and get Kang on the phone, like all this stuff. People are like, what the hell are you talking about? I love that Martok's reaction. Again, I always say like they always keep him very Klingon. He's likable, but he's still very Klingon. He pulls out his knife. He's just like, I'm just gonna murder this guy and get command of my ship back. It's like, yeah. For what we know of like Klingon culture, that is like 100% justified. And then Worf having to be the badass, like catch the knife and then punch Kor out. I don't know. This is all it's very like badass. All of that stuff.
Yeah. What's cool about these episodes with the with the kind of Klingon focus from especially some of these Ron Moore ones, is that they are both badass and yet thoughtful. There's like some real depth to them. It's absolutely the best Klingon stuff, I think.
Yeah, DS9 does Klingons the best because I say that a lot, but we get whole Klingon episodes. Like we get this, and we got Soldiers of the Empire. It really, we get Martok. Who
the Klingon and the Ferengi owe DS9 a lot.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And even like the Trill, the Bajorans, like they added a lot to the Star Trek universe on this show. But speaking of Trill and Ferengi, yes, the Quark awkward misheard the conversation that Ezri and and Kira were having about how she missed Core and wanted to be out there with them, and Quark thinks she's talking about, oh, she wants to get back together with Worf, and he intervenes, and but she thinks it's sweet and calls him a sweetheart, and he apparently reads too much into that, and Jake gives him a hard time, as you pointed out. But yeah.
Look at Jake in the back of the picture that you've pulled up, the screen grab. Look at him laughing his ass off at Ezri and Quark. He's just beaming with like future plans to bust Quark's balls.
Yeah. And it's they kind of downplay it. They don't really put too much attention on it. But I love the friendship between Jake and Quark that they start in season 6. I think it gets started when Jake stays behind when all the other Federation people evacuate the station at the end of season 5. That's when we start seeing him like hanging out in the bar a lot. These are like his only friends, without his dad and the Starfleet people.
Reporters got to hang out in bars. That's a tradition too. That's it fits.
Yeah, and he's trying to like write novels, so he's like trying to like study people. He was always a people watcher. I'm kind of a people watcher. I like to like hang out in bars and
his first date was a Dabo girl. I'm sure he probably feels on some level he owes Quark on that.
Yeah, I'm sure. But they've definitely set up that Quark, he had like that big love with Jadzia, and now he seems to have just kind of transferred it. I guess Ferengi logic. He's like, I'll just all those love credits I had in the Jadzia account, I'm just going to route them over to the Ezri account. It's like a transaction for him,
right?
And so we'll see what kind of results that yields going forward.
On an anecdotal note, I liked that Jadzia ordered a Moscow Mule, which is
Ezri,
yeah. Ezri ordered a Moscow Mule, which is it is a drink I like.
It is a very normie drink, but she's not as like as like extreme and badass as Jadzia. She's more like down to earth and normal. Yeah,
it was a little odd to see somebody. It'd be like somebody getting a margarita or something like that.
Yeah, it's like she doesn't like Ractaginos. She's like, oh no, I hate this. And let's start our final episode, the Siege of AR-558. Which I actually forgot to write down who it was written and directed by, but I can grab that very quickly. This is the advantage, by the way, of like listening to the podcast instead of watching this on YouTube, is that I edit the awkward, dumb stuff like this out. But here we go. Written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler, directed by Winrick Colby. During a supply run to AR-558, Sisko finds the defending Starfleet unit with over 2/3 of the troops dead and the remaining soldiers' morale extremely low. When the Defiant comes under attack, Sisko, Bashir, Dax, Nog, and Quark choose to remain on the planet, which is about to come under attack by a much larger contingent of Jem'Hadar soldiers. This is the big gritty war episode. It's a big favorite of mine, but what do you think of it, Dave?
I liked it, but I don't think it's going to land in my big favorites. I thought it was some of its wartime observations were a little tropey. At the same time, I liked the performances. I thought it's a pretty quintessential frontline battle, which we really hadn't seen in this in the show yet, like a ground troop battle. Reminded me in a roundabout way, even though it's been a long time since I've seen it, of the Babylon 5 episode Gropos, which was about the ground troops. And I think it one-ups Babylon 5 in that case, or at least my memory of it.
Well, it even has a Babylon 5 actor with Bill Mummy as...
yeah, that's right. Lanier.
Kellen,
you know what's funny? I didn't even think about that. Like, I was just like, oh yeah, it's the guy from Lost in Space.
Well, I'll say that I love Babylon 5. I have to always preface that, because if, anytime you don't say Babylon 5 is the greatest, most fantastic show ever made, like that entire fandom will cry about it for 3 years and, be big babies. But, I'm sure they're going to get mad at me now for saying that and prove my point.
Fatheree, Babylon 5 doesn't get the spotlight and long-time approval that Star Trek does with its many, many series. They've got a bit of a chip on their shoulder, and we say this as Babylon 5 fans. It's hard. They're the forgotten ones.
Fair enough, but I'll just say this:
Yeah.
someone who is again a huge fan of Babylon 5. It's the only non-Star Trek show I've ever made content talking about on the Tex-Trek YouTube channel. Didn't get in the podcast, but it's there on YouTube. People want to find it, go look for it. The death that they give Bill Mummy's character here, well, shit. I'm gonna spoil Babylon 5 season 5 for folks, so sorry about that. But the death that they give his character here is a billion times better than the terrible character assassination death that they give Lanier in Babylon 5 season 5.
Yeah, and that's a shame because Lanier is a really good character.
But it's cool seeing it's cool that Ira Stephen Bear is so proud of like Star Trek killed Will Robinson, because he was Will Robinson on Lost in Space, if anyone doesn't know. The other famous actor that's in here is Tuco from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I think he's in that show too. I haven't watched it, but
he is.
He's played by I think the actor's name is something Cruz. It's not Wilson Cruz. That's the guy on Discovery. But
right, yeah, I don't know him off the top of my head either. But
he plays the character Vargas. He's really good. And another big standout for me is Patrick Kilpatrick, who's fantastic. He also plays a Kazon in what might be the only great Kazon episode in Star Trek Voyager. The Initiations that had Aaron Eisenberg as like the young Kazon hanging out with Chakotay. Patrick Kilpatrick. Part of the reason why I like this episode so much is I like his character of Reese, but I got to meet this guy at a convention just as aired. It was in El Paso, birthplace of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry, of all places, but El Paso, Texas in 2002. And he was a super awesome dude. I talked to him for a good while at his table. I got an autograph from him, and he was telling me how he always plays like these, these big scary guys on TV shows and stuff. And normally he's like, the big scary guy is like a henchman or something, gets like punched out by the hero. And he's playing a big scary guy here in DS9, but at least he got to be like, kind of a heroic one.
Mm-hmm.
And he really liked his character here. And I just love that they show the grittiness of the war. War is hell. Someone like sweet little Nog, who we all love, goes through the grinder, loses a leg. The first time I watched this, I was scared Nog would die. Like I thought it like might happen.
Yeah.
Because they had killed Jadzia, they had killed Zial, so I was like, this is the final season, so I was
right.
Like,
and when you have like him having like a heartfelt conversation with the captain, I can see how you would absolutely feel that. You'd be like, shit, we're gonna maybe get one more conversation with Sisko and it's gonna be over for him.
Yeah, it's not unlike when Sisko and Worf were talking to Jadzia on her deathbed.
It's true.
So yeah, I still had that, in my recent memory, so I was very worried. The Ferengi shriek that I know you're a big fan of, Dave.
Oh man, well, there was one an episode back. There were like an episode or two back. There was a Ferengi shriek. I always like hearing it. This one they turned it on its ear for me, and it was like, oh man, it's a Ferengi shriek that is like. There's like a heartbreak, and so that was actually, I thought, pretty clever of them to do. Yeah, that's brutal. I knew this was going to happen at some point. I did remember that Nog lost a leg, and I wasn't quite sure what the context would be. I really don't know how they portray it from here on after.
There's an episode that deals with the consequences coming up very soon.
Okay, cool.
But speaking of that,
but yeah, it was kind of startling. You know what I thought? By the way, I thought that one of those whatever they call those disappearing quantum mines or whatever.
Oh, the Houdinis, yeah, the subspace mines.
The subspace mines. I thought that was what's going to get him. I thought they're going to be like, "Oh my God, we won this hard-fought victory. It's amazing, and most of us are alive." And then he was just going to get blown apart by like this mine. Yeah, it's like either way, it was pretty tense, pretty fraught.
But the Ferengi shriek that they do here that both humanizes Nog, but also, it kind of like humanizes the Ferengi, like, when we see like one in pain and stuff like that, but it's still, it's weird and kind of inhuman and alien at the same. So it's both like reminding us of his alienness, but also humanizes him at the same time. And I think that's really neat that, things like that happen in science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations between Quark and Sisko about like, you wouldn't send Jake out there, and Quark not wanting to be the Negus send him to just gather information. He wanted to report from the front line, so he's reluctantly here. But how he talks about how like Yeah, these humans, you take away their comforts, you take away like their good food and their holosuites and stuff, and they will become as vicious as any bloodthirsty Klingon.
Feels like a quintessential Deep Space Nine moment. One of those moments that sort of is a little bit meta, but absolutely fits the sequence, fits the scene it's in.
And I think
and he's not wrong.
He's not wrong, and I think it's terrifically Star Trek to say that, to have that, to explain that in here, because to me Star Trek is a collection of stories that explore the human experience and explore humanity. And that's something that Gene Roddenberry made very clear in the original series, is that like there's these nasty impulses that sometimes people are badmirals and stuff like that. Like that is something that we grapple with, that we have to be aware of, that even to become like these more evolved, more advanced, more ethical people, wiser people of the future, you still have to grapple with the bad side of humanity, and things like war can bring that out. And there's this really cool Roddenberry quote that I love, where I'm just going to paraphrase it, I don't know exactly what he said, but something like, humans are very interesting creatures because we're the only creature we know of that's like one part God and one part animal. And we kind of have, our head like up in the clouds, and we can imagine all this great stuff and think these wonderful ideas and stuff. But our feet are still kind of like stuck in the mud with all the animals and our primal instincts and our barbaric side and stuff like that. And that's a great way of, like explaining humans. And we can thrive to be better, be like that part that, has our head up in the clouds. But we have to remember that we have our feet in the muck also at the same time. The duality of man, I guess, to quote another war story with a Full Metal Jacket.
That's a good observation. I like that. Jill in the comments was pointing out that it's like she wrote, it's really unacceptable how undermanned that unit was. They should have fished or cut bait. And the only thing I can say is I'm guessing that in the desperate times of the war, they're like, what was it, a relay station, and they hadn't figured it out yet. They're like, well, what if this is what's the code, the Enigma code, like from World War II. They're like, well, what if this gets us our Enigma code? It's like worth it, but to keep it with what resources we have, maybe even if they all die, it's like, hold it as long as humanly possible. I don't know, by the way, if anything comes of this relay station. You can probably spoil that for me if there's anything more to come out of it, or if it was just a plot point for the episode.
Well, the whole Chintaka system is kind of pivotal for the war. Let's put this in context with the bigger picture of the war itself and the stage that we're at in the war. The Chintaka system is what they captured at the end of season 6. That's kind of the first time they were able to grab Cardassian territory. They took the station back. They were struggling to contain the Dominion within Cardassian territory. They were losing Benzar and Betazoid and everything. And then, the Romulans come in. So, okay, now we can, not only can we push the Dominion back into Cardassian territory, but we can start to encroach into it. And we've grabbed Chintaka, and we're holding on to it.
Mm-hmm.
This gets back to the original concept of Deep Space Nine, of this is a show about consequences. It's not like the Enterprise, shows up on a planet, solves a problem, and then leaves.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna stick around and see what the long-term consequences are. And they captured Chintaka, but 5 months ago when they captured it, these dudes were here trying to hold on to it. Just holding Chintaka has been so difficult, and all these lives have been lost, and they're not supposed to be there that long. The Starfleet policy is to rotate people out after 90 days, but
right.
What do you do when war doesn't allow you to do that? And you have people asked to stay here for 5 months, almost half a year, and there's more Chintaka stuff that'll come in the future, but being able to hack that relay, get in, it's a very Federation idea of like, oh yeah, we're going to use like our technology and our know-how and kind of like we're going to techno-babble a solution, or we're going to, tech the tech, which they do by like moving the Houdini mines. And then we get like the moral dilemma of that, of like, oh, this is such like a nasty weapon. It's such a cruel way to wage war. But
I love that scene. Is it Ezri who makes note of that?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a great sequence.
And the people that he's stuck with, that Sisko is stuck with here, not the soldiers that have been here, but the Defiant people. He's stuck here with like Quark, Ezri, and Nog. And no offense to any of those characters, those are the I guess Bashir is here too. But I would much prefer to have Worf and O'Brien, like the veteran soldiers,
right,
down here than like the two youngsters, Ezri and Nog, and then, Quark certainly has like no business on the battlefield, but does he not get like some cool scenes out? I love the stuff with him and Sisko. Armin Shimmerman is so great. I think this is one of the best performances he gives. Just I love that
Agreed.
Moment when he is defending his nephew from the Jemadar. It doesn't happen often, but when Quark does, have to shoot people, it feels like a big earned moment.
Yeah, I agree. That was a fantastic shot. I think the great thing about Armin Shimmerman and like the thing that he always brought to Quark was he knows kind of when to play big and when to rein it in a little bit to have like a quieter personal moment where Quark might say something without a big emphasis. He might be quieter about it or just lose his natural exuberance. And so yeah, you really get this depth of highs and lows with the character. By the way, that's a great also still of him turning around with a pistol. It's just that should be the cover for the 90s DVD of the John Woo Quark movie.
Speaking of Quark, though, the weird thing with him that does not age well is when Nog is talking to him about, oh, you see that human over there, Reese? He's got Ketracel white tubes hanging on his necklace. Do you know how he got them? And Quark says, I don't know, mail order. Like, I'm assuming that like tons of people that might watch this show today in 2022 would have no idea what mail order even means. Like, oh yeah, people used to like buy things like
they order stuff through Amazon on the regular. I think it probably still around. I thought you were just going to say, Fatheree, that the notion that Nog was liking this guy's death trophies of Ketracel White had aged poorly.
No, I think that's like Nog. He the way that like he looked up to like the Red Squad.
Oh yeah,
kids, the way
I felt it was like 100% believable from him.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Reese is basically like Starfleet Rambo. And that kind of sounds cool, but like, no, actually, like it sucks to be Reese. Yeah, like he's such like a badass soldier that he like survives this battle. He saves Sisko. It looks like Sisko's about to die. He's like knocked out. There's like a Jemadar standing over him, and then like when Sisko opens his eyes, sometime later, he sees like Reese standing there with like a bunch of dead Jemadar. Like let me help you up, Captain. This guy is like, he's very good at being a soldier, but yeah, he does not enjoy it at all. It is terrible. Like he just seems like so like heartbroken.
These are other more characters that I feel like could use a comic book or book, that spotlighted them. Even if they weren't the leads, it'd be kind of interesting to intersect with them again.
Yeah, and Vargas is a cool character.
Those who made it, I mean.
Everyone dies but Reese. But
yeah, I guess Reese would be the only one to have any sort of follow up with. But that could be interesting too.
The guy that Tuco plays, Vargas, his story about like, you'd think that it would be like the cliche of like, yeah, this guy is like my best friend, and then like he died, and then that's why no one can touch this bandage that he put on me. But instead he's like, no, like I hated that guy, I hated that jerk. It was like when he finally died, he's like finally quiet. The one time he ever shut up, it was perfect. I loved it, but I also like hate it. It's like, man, like that felt so real. That felt like. Yeah, this guy. It sounds like, I don't know. I'm like watching like a Vietnam documentary, like hearing like some like, soldier talk,
Saving Private Ryan or something.
Yeah. So the war that they depict here, it feels like so real and so terrible, and comes with such a heavy cost. And I just love that. Star Trek for so long, it's like, yeah, like war is hell. That's why we're gonna find like other solutions. We're gonna find like better options and stuff. It's like, that's cool, but what about when you're dealing with an enemy that like won't accept any of that stuff? It's like, okay, like it's cool, you want an alternative to war, but yeah, these other people are just like, they're not having it. The founders ain't having that, and so you're forced to fight a war, even though it's the last thing you want to do.
It's essentially, yeah, war is like a version of the bully on the playground who won't become your friend, who won't listen to you trying to talk him down. He's just going to beat the shit out of you. What can you do about it? Um, it's a quick aside about the episode. It had a very set-like look to it, kind of some classic Trek rocks and terrain. Probably
Yeah.
some real terrain, but a lot of sets.
Not a
But
high-budget episode. It all took place on a dark soundstage with fake rocks.
yeah, but I like those. There's something I like about sets, physical sets, whether it's like in old black and white movies or Tim Burton movies. He's a guy who likes some sets that and doesn't mind if they look a little set like. Anyway, I thought it was still effective. I don't say it as a critique.
Yeah, no, to me, like fake rocks are kind of part of Star Trek. Like,
It's kind of true. Yeah,
I like it. I even like it on like Discovery and Strange New Worlds and stuff. So, just now they have like an AR wall.
Yeah, right.
We're 2023, but. Yeah, so that stuff's cool. The ending, like when Worf is like, "Oh, this is like a great victory worthy of song," and Cisco's just like, "It cost enough," and then that line of dialogue at the end with like Kira, where and Cisco when Kira's like, "The latest casualty report is in. It's 1,730 dead," and just Cisco being like, "Yeah, like we got to remember, like they're more than just names." It would be easy for us as the audience as well as the characters of Deep Space Nine to get desensitized to seeing, that big list of names, the casualty report. It'd be easy to get like desensitized to that. So it's like, here, okay, let's spend some time with some of these names that die, and let's get to know Kellen and Vargas and what was the woman's name? Nadia Larkin.
Oh,
Nadia Larkin.
yeah.
So, but yeah, so. War is hell, and even someone innocent and lovable like Nog is not immune to the horrors of war. So that'll be more stuff to unpack next week when we continue Deep Space Nine season 7. But we'll be talking about the next 8 episodes. So that's everything from season 7 episode 9 Covenant all the way through season 7 episode 16. This is that long Latin one, but Enter Arma Enum Silent Legis.
Oh,
it means,
that is big.
Do you want to know what that means? Do you want to know the English translation?
Go ahead.
In times of war, the law falls silent. Although I've heard that's not, the grammar is incorrect in that, and it's not actually the correct Latin way to say that.
Sometimes that happens.
But, so yeah.
So by the way, the things that I have been surprised by this season that I'm going to be excited to see play out will be things like the founders seemingly dying. I don't know how fully that is exactly what's happening, but that's super interesting. What's his name? Gul Dukat like bonded to a Pa Wraith and all that. There's a lot of things I didn't expect to happen have happened. So it's and even Ezri's arrival is this weird kind of like wild card in there. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this play out.
Well, yeah. Next week we're gonna have some more Ezri episodes. We will have Gul Dukat will show back up. Also, Section 31 is not.
Oh, cool.
They still have some stuff to do. So.
Yeah, you pointed that out, that they're like introducing like new concepts here and like the almost the final season at the time.
Yeah, there's I think we've met all the important characters of the show. There's actually like 2 recurring characters. They're not like major players, but there's 2 recurring characters that get introduced in the final 10 episodes of the show. So with it, even that late in the game, there's still like some new people showing up.
And Damar is also an interesting wild card who I can't tell where he and Wei-Yun will end up in all of this mess.
Yeah, so what's going on there? So yeah, a lot of interesting things to go on, and they're wrapping things up. We wrapped up Kor's story. We did some more augment stuff with cured Serena, so took care of that. So yeah, there's plenty more storylines that are going to come to a head. So looking forward to more DS9 next week, and then in 3 weeks, weekly Picard coverage. So, and then of course, Strange New Worlds, Discovery, Lower Decks, Prodigy, all kinds of great Star Trek to come in 2023. We might be at the end of DS9, but we're just getting started on 2023. So lots of fun stuff around the corner.
Hell yeah.
We'll be back Friday night, 7 p.m. Central live on YouTube, or you can listen to us later wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek. And follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.